On August 15, 2026, Vietnam Airlines Flight VN-34 was preparing to leave Munich, Germany, for Hanoi, Vietnam. The aircraft was a Boeing 787-9, registered VN-867. On board were 271 passengers and 16 crew members. The departure appeared routine at first as the Dreamliner accelerated along Munich Airport's runway 26L. But during the takeoff roll, something went seriously wrong. The aircraft continued accelerating down the runway, but its rotation came unusually late. Instead of lifting off near the normal rotation point, the Boeing 787 continued toward the end of the runway. Then, suddenly, the aircraft rotated. A huge cloud of dust and dirt erupted behind the aircraft as it reached the runway end. The tail struck the ground, and the aircraft became airborne only after passing beyond the paved runway surface. According to photographic evidence reviewed by the German Aviation Investigation Authorities, the aircraft became airborne approximately 120 meters, or about 400 feet, beyond the runway end, already in the grass and around the first row of approach lights. The takeoff had become a serious runway excursion. The aircraft nevertheless managed to climb away from Munich. It eventually reached approximately flight level 100. But the problems were not over. After takeoff, the crew received warning indications associated with the tailstrike, as well as tire pressure warnings. The crew reported that they needed to dump fuel before returning to Munich. As the aircraft remained airborne, the crew faced the difficult task of assessing the damage and preparing for a return to the airport. Approximately 90 minutes after departure, the Boeing 787 returned toward Munich. Before committing to the landing, the crew carried out a low approach to runway 26R. They then performed another low approach, giving the crew an opportunity to assess the aircraft and the runway environment before landing. Eventually, the decision was made to land. The Boeing 787 touched down on runway 26R, but the damaged aircraft did not emerge from the landing normally. Smoke was seen coming from the left main landing gear as the aircraft rolled along the runway. The aircraft eventually became disabled on the runway. Runway 26R was subsequently closed. Preliminary information indicated that the aircraft had overrun the end of runway 26L during the original takeoff and damaged runway lights. Investigators later began examining exactly what happened during those final moments of the takeoff roll. Video evidence reviewed on August 16th suggested that the right-hand main landing gear brakes had activated approximately 210 meters before the end of the runway. The wheels then appeared to lock at, and after, the runway end. The visible track continued until the aircraft finally became airborne. However, the available video did not provide enough visibility of the left side of the runway to determine whether the left-hand brakes had also activated or locked. An aerial photograph obtained on August 17th provided additional evidence. It indicated that both the left and right main landing gear brakes had been active before the aircraft reached the runway end. The track from the left-hand side appeared to fade after the aircraft crossed the runway end. These details became important pieces of evidence as investigators began reconstructing the takeoff. The sequence raised several critical questions. Why did the aircraft rotate so late? Why did braking occur during the final part of the runway? And how did the aircraft continue beyond the runway before becoming airborne? At this stage, those questions remained part of the investigation rather than established conclusions. Following the incident, Vietnam's Civil Aviation Authority submitted a report to the country's ministry on August 17th. According to the report, the crew received warnings indicating a tailstrike and tire pressure problems after takeoff. The crew then returned to Munich so the aircraft could undergo a technical inspection. The 287 people aboard the aircraft, 271 passengers, and 16 crew, ultimately had to be provided with alternative travel arrangements. The incident was now being investigated from two sides of the flight: the failed takeoff sequence and the subsequent landing with a potentially damaged landing gear and tires. Germany's Federal Bureau of Aircraft Accident Investigation, known as the BFU, was expected to investigate the occurrence. For the passengers, what began as a routine long-haul departure from Munich had turned into a highly unusual emergency. For investigators, the evidence left behind on the runway, in the grass, and around the aircraft would become crucial. The tire marks, brake tracks, damaged runway lights, aircraft damage, and video and photographic evidence would all help reconstruct those critical seconds when VN-34 ran out of runway.